war, I felt
Mhm.
I needed to cheer up.
Very good, very good. Well, you know, the reason not to wear red is because back in the days of the Ramah, that was the color which professional women wore in order to announce that they're available. And I remember once when I was an innocent Yeshivat here in Jerusalem. I know I should not have noticed, but I could not help but notice that the young girls in Mea Sha'arim always walked around with black stockings, which well, I guess that's the style, I suppose. Very modest black stockings, you know. But then I was visiting in Amsterdam. And in those days, there was one kosher restaurant, Meir's kosher restaurant. I was looking for. This was before the days of GPS. I got lost, and the kosher restaurant happens to be right next to the Neue Oude Kerk, the red light district. And as I was walking along the street there in Amsterdam looking for the kosher restaurant, I could not help but practice my Dutch. I saw signs all over the place, Kamer te Hoer. And Kamer te Hoer, well, means room to rent, but it also refers to the profession of the ladies who rent the rooms. And you can see that the rooms to rent were on ground level with big picture windows with the merchandise displayed in the window. And occasionally a customer would go in, the curtain would come down, and eventually it would go up again, and the customer would come out. Now, not all of the women who had not all the professional women who had Kama Tahir, not all of them were displaying their wares in their rooms. Some of them were walking up and down the street. And the way to identify a professional woman was by the color of the stockings. The women who were wearing black stockings, those were the professional women in Amsterdam. Uh, of course, the message conveyed by the black stockings worn by the young girls in Mea Sha'arim, a message of modesty, is one could not have a greater opposite than the message conveyed by black stockings in Amsterdam. So when the Ramah prohibits women from wearing red, well, in a place and time where the message of a woman wearing red is she's advertising herself as a professional woman, well, in that place and time, Jewish women should not dress that way.
Anyway, I'm very contrite that the war got me to wear red. I will now revert back to my neutral colors.
Oh, okay.
And also
Okay.
the beatniks wore black stockings.
The beatniks?
Yeah, I go back to the beatnik era. They wore black
Oh,
stockings.
okay. Well, enough about stockings, unless there are other questions
No.
about stockings. Before I begin, what I want to talk about, I had planned on talking today about Mayim Acharonim. However, over the last few days, several people have asked me about certain halachot, bein hamitzarim, in this 3 week period between Shiva Saba Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. So I'm going to focus on that for today. We'll get to my macharonim another time. But before I begin talking about bein hamitzarim, the halachas which are appropriate this time of the year, let me ask you if you have any questions of a halachic nature that you wish to discuss. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to straighten up something that I had written to you, a question about halacha during war, about the purity of arms, and I never received a response, and I decided that you were ignoring it because you were uncomfortable, and I just want you to say to me, I'm uncomfortable, or just, not, is it a valid question? Is it a halachic question? You don't have to do anything that you're not comfortable with, but I was just curious to know why I didn't you didn't respond.
Rav Goren, who was the chief rabbi of Israel. Before he was the chief rabbi of Israel, he was the chief rabbi of the army. And he was an extraordinarily controversial figure. Rav Goren succeeded in the course of his life in alienating
I know,
everyone,
you told us. We've
everyone.
heard
There
this.
there was no one left. By the end of his life, there's no one left who liked him.
I like him.
I too have the highest respects for him. And his sefer that he published on Milhama is, in my opinion, the best study on the matter, and I would refer you to that. That's very authoritative. And Rav Goren was, well, there are not many of us left who like Rav Goren, but I think he was a formidable Malach. Okay, and any other issues that we should talk about before we get to Ben Hamitzarim? Okay, look now, let me get the stuff on the screen. I'm good at this. Where do I click here?
I just wanted to say, I'm Sipora. I was the one who called you this past week about the car.
Oh,
I just wanted to make that connection.
oh, okay. Now I know it. Now I even know what you look like. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for introducing yourself.
Thank you.
Now, why is this not right? Okay, I think I've succeeded in displaying the stuff on the screen. Now, you should have gotten this as an email attachment. The issue begins with history. This period of the year, historically, between Shiva Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, this time of year is the time of year where historically many disasters have befallen the Jewish people. And therefore, this period of time is presumed to be a time of sakana, a time of danger. This is a time of year we have to be very careful. For example, although there's no specific prohibition to go swimming during the period of time between Shiva Tammuz and Rosh Chodesh Av, although there's no specific prohibition, the poskim do emphasize the importance of being careful. Of course, you'd always be careful when you go swimming. If children are sent to swim, of course they need supervision. Of course, you have to be careful. But during this time of year, one should be super duper extra careful because of the danger which is inherent in this time of year. Now all of this leads to the following question, which for some reason people have been asking me about recently. In the good old days, when all was right with the world, children were educated by rebbes in school, malamdim, not girls, because girls were never sent to school, but the boys were sent to school, and the primary motivation for learning was, well, the teacher would hit them, the teacher would slap them if they were not paying attention or were unable to recite their lessons properly. And it's the physical punishment which, in the good old days, when all was right with the world, that was the motivation for Jewish education. Now, I remember back in the 1980s when the state of Israel, a secular state, you never know what they're going to do next. They passed this law prohibiting physical punishment in educational institutions in the state of Israel. And I remember old timers, even an uncle of mine, complaining, oh, this is the end of Jewish education if we cannot have physical punishment of children in cheder in Jewish schools. Well, we're going to now look at the halachas governing this issue. And the question which I want everyone to have in the back of their minds is the following issue. before we begin looking at the halachas of physical punishment for children in school, here's the idea to have in the back of your mind. It says in Sanhedrin, and we're going to get to this in greater detail, but this is just now for the background thought. It says, Hamerim Yad al Havero, anyone who raises his hand to strike someone else, even though he didn't hit them, just raising the hand to strike someone else, that makes you a rasha, that makes you a wicked person. You cannot count as one of 10 for a minyan. You're excluded, muhram, benidui, from all community affairs. Just hamerim yado al chavero, without actually striking someone, just raising your hand against someone. That's serious enough. Well, that's a Gemara in Sanhedrin, and that's of course a halacha which is not surprisingly copied over by the Rambam and the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch and all the poskim. Well, how can we make peace with that halacha, according to which you're not even allowed to raise your hand in anger against anyone? And the halachas we're about to look at, which talk about physical punishment in educational settings. Let's begin with the Yoredeya in the Shulchan Aruch. These are the words of the Shulchan Aruch.
Wait, this is connected to the 3 weeks?
Yeah, we'll see the connection in a moment.
Okay.
First, in general, this is all year long until we come to the special halachas of the 3 weeks, all year long. Lo yakeh oto hamilamed makat. When the teacher, when the Rebbe strikes the student, the Talmud, the disciple, it should not be a achzari, a vicious strike. You should not hit the child viciously. A little bit, shoot him, lobe makel. The teacher should not use a whip or a staff. Ella instead, ritzuak tana, use a small strap. Hit the kid with a small strap. That's all you should do. This is for all year long. Now, the source of this idea is in the Gemara. The Gemara in Baba Basra says, Amar le Rav Shmuel bar Shila. The rabbis in the Gemara said, Ki machis lianoka, when you are punishing, when you are striking, when you are hitting, when you're punishing a child, lo timche ele ba'arkat basane, you should use only something like a shoelace for the purpose. If you have to strike a child, use a shoelace for the purpose. Rashi explains Ritzua shel min alim, a shoelace. Klomar, that means maka kala shelo yuzak. That's a very light blow, which will not do any damage. Okay. Well, according to the Gemara, and not surprisingly, the Shulchan Aruch paskins this way. Physical punishment is in order, is permitted, but it has to be very light. The lightness defined as use a shoelace for the purpose. Now, one of the great rabbis who alive today is Rav Avram Rubin, he's most famous for giving hechsherim to food. His hechsher on different foods is really quite well accepted. But in addition to being a well-known Rav HaMachshir, he also has very strong opinions about just about everything else in halacha. These are his words. Al pi Rashi, according to this Rashi that we just saw a few lines ago, that a shoelace is the limit of physical punishment for a child in school. According to this, Yesh Lomar, we have to say, T'lahakot biyad afilu im namashi petucha pachusa makel. It follows from Rashi that using the hand to strike a child, even though a strike of the hand is less severe than the strike of a staff. And the Shulchan Aruch already told us you're not allowed to use a whip or a staff. But what about the hand? Shutim, using the hand is less severe than a whip. Well, the whip and staff are prohibited by the Shulchan Aruch. Makol makom, in any event, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't talk about striking the child with the hand. Kasha yoter memaka b'ritzur. But a hand, striking the child with a hand is surely stronger than using a shoelace. Hein mitzad atzma, hein mitzad sheyachol lehakot biyado gam maka chazaka. After all, one can strike a person very strongly with the hand. And since we have no way of defining, no way of measuring what a gentle slap is with the hand, hands are off limits. Can't use hands to strike a child. The blow must be absolutely minimalized. Therefore, we say, there's no way to specify the lightness of the blow if you're using a hand. You can't use a hand for the purpose. Asur lahakot biyad. That's his conclusion. Okay, now, he, of course, uchai imanu hayom, he's alive today, and not surprisingly, he takes the view that physical punishment has to be so minimal that there's no danger. There's no danger of any injury to the child. Only shoelaces can be used. Let's take a look at earlier sources. We're still talking about all year long. We haven't come to the 3 weeks yet. The Shulchan Aruch Harav was written by the Balatanya, by the first Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Sefer, for better or worse, has exactly the same name as the Shulchan Aruch of Rabbi Yosef Karo. In Chabad circles, it's called, of course, the Shulchan Aruch of the Balatanya or the Shulchan Aruch of the Alter Rebbe. Outside of Chabad circles, it's called the Shulchan Aruch Harav. He says as follows, and this is in the old days, before the 1980s. Mutar l'chakot banav haktanim. It is permissible to strike your small children, to spank them. Afilu shelo b'shvil chinuch Torah mitzvahs, even if the reason you're doing it is not educational, it's not for teaching Torah or making them do mitzvahs. You just want to teach them to behave properly. Even if that's your only motive, that the children should behave properly, it's okay to strike them, to hit them. After all, the parents hit the children for the children's benefit. You're doing it l'tovatam, for the benefit of the children. Tovatam mutelat alav. And since the parents are obligated to do what's best for the child, well, that's why it's correct for the parents to hit the child litovatam, for their own benefit. Of course, in chinuch, that's correct, but even outside of the realm of chinuch, for example, teaching them to behave properly, that's also correct. Let me point out in a footnote that there's a linguistic problem here that we're encountering. When I use the word chinuch in a halachic context like this, I'm talking about the halachot of chinuch. Outside of halachic discourse, the word chinuch is used for many, many things. But in halachic discourse, the word chinuch means exactly teaching Torah and nothing else. People like me, I'm so cynical. My cynicism, as you know, is a great burden upon my shoulders. It's something which is very difficult to live with, but that's the way it is. I am very cynical about our Jewish educational system that we have here in Israel, that is in Europe, in North America, all over the world. I'm very cynical about the Jewish educational system. I don't think it's doing a very good job. One of the many reasons that our ma'arechet hachinuch, our educational system, is, in my opinion, not doing a very good job. One of the many reasons is it seems to me that very few people, if anyone, in the world of Jewish education really cares very much about chinuch. It seems to me that if you ask just about anyone in the world of Jewish education, tell me, what's really important in chinuch? Well, you'll receive an hour-long drasha from whoever you ask. Whoever you ask will have slightly different answers. Some people will say, some mechanchim, some educators will say, well, what's really important, the most important thing in chinuch is to produce a good chassid. Others might say, oh, what's really important in chinuch, the most important thing is to produce a product, a student who's going to go out into the world and be Torah observant. Some might say, oh, the most important element in chinuch, the most important element in Jewish education is musar. They have to learn to be proper mention. Well, I doubt you'll find many people, you might not find anyone, who will say that the main purpose of chinuch is teaching Torah, which in the halacha context, that's all chinuch means. The obligation to teach the child Torah is an obligation which min ha-Torah falls upon the parents. Vishinantam levonecha, it's the parents who have the obligation to teach the children Torah. And the parents, of course, can appoint the school, the teachers in the cheder, the teachers in the school, as their shlichim, as their agents, to teach their child Torah. And well, if the staff and the leaders in the world of Jewish education do not think that teaching Torah is the most important element of Jewish education, well, of course, it always gets set by the wayside and not very successful in teaching what they, for some reason, think is not as important as other elements of what they call chinuch. In any event, when I say chinuch in halacha context, I mean teaching Torah. That's what it means. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about a biological child or an adopted child. Adoptive parents are also responsible litovatam for the good of the children in their care, and therefore you can strike them, you can hit them, you can spank them for their own benefit. V'im ein banav shomrim b'kolo. If you find that your children do not listen to you, things have changed. I'll give you an example of the dimensions of the change. As recently as 100 years ago, not so long ago, the generation of my parents, after all, I'm not that old, but as recently as 100 years ago, the Mishnah Brura defines the age of chinuch. At what age do children have to be taught to do mitzvahs? At what age should a child be taught to keep Shabbos or keep milk and meat separate or any halacha? At what age should the child be taught to do that? And the answer, according to the Mishnah Brura, is when the child age that the child obeys what the parents tell the child. Well, that might have been a good criterion 100 years ago, but today, most children grow up and never reach that age where they obey what their parents tell them. Things have changed a lot. But back in those days, when all was right with the world, when children were obedient, well, perhaps not at age 2 or 3, but by age 4 or 5, by the time the child was obedient, that is the age, according to the Mishnah Brura, when the obligations of chinuch begin. Now, what happens if the child has reached the age where he or she should be obedient but isn't. Mutar lahakotam. Of course, it's okay to strike them, to hit them, to spank them. Afilu letovat atzmo. Even though you're spanking them, even though you're striking them, not for the benefit of the child, but the parent is doing it for his or her own benefit. It's the parent who's going to benefit from the child obeying. Do this, clean up the dining room, wash the dishes. Well, if the child doesn't obey, of course, you can strike the child, and washing the dishes, cleaning up the dining room is not for the child's benefit, it's for the benefit of the parents, so they won't have to do the work themselves. That's okay. That physical punishment is correct in that situation. It's lo l'tovatam, even though it's not for the benefit of the children. It's correct for the parents to inflict corporal punishment so that the children will obey. But if the children are obedient, if the children are obedient, then you can strike them only if it's for their benefit. Otherwise, not. Well, this is the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch Harav. This is the opinion of the, and I could have chosen 100 other examples, but in the good old days when all was right with the world, this was the standard approach to child rearing. Okay, up till now, we've spoken about, in general, all year long, physical punishment, corporal punishment for children. Now, let's speak specifically about this time of year, beginning with Shiva Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz, and going until Tisha B'Av. Here are the words of the Shulchan Aruch regarding this time of year. Tzarich l'zeher, it is prohibited. L'hizaher in Israeli Hebrew means to be careful. But in rabbinic literature, in halachic literature, l'hizaher means it's prohibited. There has to be a prohibition. Miyud Zayin b'Tammuz ad Tisha B'Av, from the 17th of Tammuz until Tisha B'Av, Bein HaMitzarim, 3 weeks during this disastrous block of time in Jewish history, prohibited shelo yelech yechidi. You're not allowed to go walking outside alone. Well, if you're walking outside alone, no one with you, well, something bad could happen. You can get attacked. You could all kinds of bad things could happen to you, and you have to be careful not to walk alone outside. Me'arba sha'ot, te'sha'ot, from 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock. It doesn't mean 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock on our timekeeping schedule. It means beginning at sunrise, then you count one relative hour after another. Arba sha'ot is typically the middle of the morning. That's sof zman tefillah. Until 9 hours have passed after sunrise. That's in the late afternoon. During midday, late morning, midday, and early afternoon, one should not walk alone. Well, why not? Why is the danger so bad during those hours of the day? Well, Shulchan Aruch says, Mishum shebahem ketev meriri sholet, because there are bad spirits, evil spirits, which are roaming around during those hours. And if you are alone, they are likely to attach themselves to you, and the evil spirits will get you. If you're interested in learning more about Ketev Miriri, this specific evil spirit, well, you have the reference here in Tractate Psachim, where you can read all about how this evil spirit works. Well, not only is there danger in walking alone outside from mid-morning to late afternoon, not only that, but the Shulchan Aruch says, Lo yakech hatalmidim b'yamim ahem. Although corporal punishment all year long is correct in the educational system, although it's correct all year long for the Rebbe, for the teacher, to strike the child, not during the 3 weeks. Oh, well, why not? What's wrong with striking the child during the 3 weeks? The source of this idea is in a midrash. Let's take a look at the midrash. I found the text of the midrash online with the nikud, but then when I was looking at it, I was so unhappy with the nikud, with the vowel points. I spent so much time trying to change the vowel points to correct them. I just gave up after a while. I'm not gonna copy localized texts anymore from anywhere. This is what it says in the midrash. Rabbi Yochanan, have a mefaked l'safraya. Rabbi Yochanan commanded the teachers, the safraya, the teachers of Tanakh, and the matnaya, the teachers of Mishnah. We're talking about the teachers of the little children. Rabbi Yochanan commanded the teachers in primary school, he commanded them not to raise a strap against the children. Remember the shoelace? Not to raise the shoelace against the children during this period of time. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani, Rabbi Shmuel told the teachers in primary school, he taught them that children should be given off from school. They should have free hours during these times. They should not teach the children at all, impose no burdens on the children during these hours. Well, the Midrash is clearly the source of the idea in the Shulchan Aruch that during this time of year, physical punishment is prohibited. Now, this is a little bit strange. I think it's well known that Reb Yosef Karo, in his introduction to the Shulchan Aruch, emphasizes that the sources upon which the Shulchan Aruch is based are Rambam, Rif, Rosh, the primary Rishonim, the principal Rishonim upon whom Halacha stands. And that's in general true. Almost all of the Shulchan Aruch is rooted exactly in those sources, Rif, Rambam, and Rosh. And here, all of a sudden, we have a halacha which has its source, indeed, not even in any Rishon. The source is in a midrash, which is quite unusual in the Shulchan Aruch. And you'll also notice that what's happened here is the concern, the issue has changed from a purely halachic one into a matter of mystical or Kabbalistic danger. There are these evil spirits even have a specific name in this case, the Ketev Meriri, which is mentioned in the Gemara as well. It's because of the mystical dangers that dangerous activities must be avoided. Among the dangerous activities to be avoided are teachers striking children in primary school. Oh, so it's a mystical element which has been introduced into the Shulchan Aruch, which is fairly unusual. Fairly unusual, at least on the surface level. As a footnote, let me point out that the Munkacher Rebbe, Rav Elazar Shapiro was his name. He was a gadol both in halacha and in Kabbalah. He was great in both worlds. The Munkacher used to say, when I am studying the Gemara, the Rambam, Rashi, the Shulchan Aruch, when I'm studying these Sfarim, I am studying Nister, the secret, esoteric, hidden wisdom. When I'm studying the Zohar HaKadosh and the writings of the Arizal and the great mystics of Tzfat, I'm engaged in the study of Nigla, revealed knowledge. Now, his use of the terminology Nigla, revealed knowledge, and Nister, mystical knowledge, is exactly the opposite of the way the terms are usually used. In general, aside from the Munkacher, anyone who speaks about Nister is talking about mystical, esoteric wisdom. And anyone who talks about Nigla, the revealed wisdom, is talking about simple, straightforward halacha. The Munkacher uses the words exactly in the opposite meaning that they usually have. And he explains. His explanation is, when I'm studying the Zohar HaKadosh and the works of the Arizal and his Talmidim, when I study those, they say that they are talking about the Eser Sfirot, the divine emanations, and that's what they're talking about. It's all right there on the surface. When I'm studying the Gemara and the Rambam and Rashi and the Shulchan Aruch, they are also talking about the Eser Spheros, the divine emanations, but the meaning is nistar, hidden, secreted, very deeply in the text. So he used the terms in just the opposite meanings that most people use them. In any event, we've seen the mystical basis for taking special care during this time of year. And I always like to look in the words of the Meiri, Menachem Meiri. He was among the Rishonim who was a hardcore rationalist, following largely in the tradition of Rambam. He was one of the Rishonim who rejected the mystical tradition and embraced only the Mishnah, Gemara, Rambam, and the technical details of Halacha. He writes as follows: Hitba'er b'Talmud Ma'arav. It says in the Western Talmud, well, the Western Talmud is what we call the Yerushalmi. The Eastern Talmud is what we call the Bavli. It says in the Yerushalmi, she'ein makinet talmidim betkufas Tammuz elamat. It says in the Yerushalmi that one should minimize the corporal punishment for children during this time of year. Amru Sham, it says there in the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan havim mefaked l'safraya. Rabbi Yochanan used to command the teachers in primary school during this time of year, and go to Shalit Boket Miriri, that during this time of year there is a mystical evil spirit, Ketef Miriri, which circulates in the world, and therefore one must be very careful. Even the Meiri, who in general is very firm in rejecting anything of a mystical, spiritual nature in halacha, hardcore rationalist, even in this case, he insists on special care to avoid danger during this time of year because of Ketef Meiri. And you'll notice in passing that there's no limitation on the time of day, unlike all the other sources who told us the Ketef Meiri circulates and is dangerous from 4 hours to 9 hours of the day, mid-morning to late afternoon. According to the Meiri, apparently it's all day long for the entire period from 17th of Tammuz until Tisha B'Av. Let's round out the discussion by seeing what the other poskim say. The Levush. Rav Mordechai Yaffa was his name. He was the leading disciple, or one of the leading disciples of the Ramah. And therefore, the Levush is particularly important in understanding difficult passages in the Ramah. Here we have one of his leading disciples to help us understand especially difficult passages in the Ramah. He wrote as follows, the Levush. Ein l'hakot afilu b'no v'talmido. Even your own children, all the more so, your disciples, you should not strike during this time of year. Va'afilu b'ritzua, shouldn't even use a shoelace. Mipnei shebehen ketev me'iri sholet. Yesh sakana b'davar. Since ketev me'iri is circulating, therefore there's danger even in the slightest corporal punishment. To further round out the picture of the poskim, the Taz, one of the two principal commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, says when the Shulchan Aruch teaches us not to strike the Talmidim, he says even with the shoelace. The Pri Megadim, Rabbi Yosef Ta'omim was his name. The Pri Megadim is what we call in the business a super commentary. A super commentary is a commentary on a commentary. The Taz is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. The Pri Megadim is a commentary on the Taz. So a commentary on a commentary is a super commentary. That's the Pri Megadim. And oh my, was he influential, extraordinarily influential. Afilu haka koldu, even the slightest blow, you're not allowed to inflict. Kan mashma b'yamim klalo, during this time of year, zero physical punishment. L'chora rak me arba teshashad, but of course, this is only from 4 hours to 9 hours, only from mid-morning to late afternoon. That's what the Levush implies, and that should be the Halacha. Now, we have a few more sources to look at before we can tie this all together. I like the Ma'amar Mordechai, one of my favorites. Mordechai was his name. For better or worse, he's called in the yeshiva world Rav Mordechai Carme, as though that was his name. But it's not true. His name was not Mordechai Carme, because in his days, 18th century France, when he lived in 18th century France, family names had not yet been introduced. It was Napoleon who introduced family names in Spain. His name was not Rav Mordechai Carmi. He was, however, the Rav of the town Crémieux. The town Crémieux in southern France was his town. He was the Rav there, and so they called him Rav Mordechai Crémieux. And if you try to spell the French name Crémieux in Hebrew letters, it comes out spelled in a way that looks like Carmi, but of course it has nothing to do with Carmi. In any event, I like the Ma'amar Mordechai. The reason I like the Ma'amar Mordechai is because he never took anything for granted. Whenever he found a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, which it did not exactly flow from the sources, wherever he found the slightest logical error in any of the commentaries, he was very fast to point it out. Let's see what he says. According to the Shulchan Aruch, physical punishment is prohibited during this time of year. Mefurish, b'midrash, the source is in the midrash, which we said. The source is in the midrash, which we quoted, and the Taz talks about this. We saw this a few lines earlier. Nearly, it seems to me, Ma'amar Mordechai writes, Maran Zal, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, lo hutzrach lefaresh zeh, should not have needed to say this. It seems superfluous to say that physical punishment, corporal punishment, is prohibited during this time of year. There's no reason to say this, because in the Yoredea, it says, Sha'ar Yemot HaShana ein l'melamed l'hakot l'talmid ela b'ritzua katana. It says in the Yoredea, when it's talking about education, only to use the shoelace. And that it comes from the Gemara. That's well-founded. Mamela, it follows, therefore, Masha he's here kan shelo yaku talmidim b'yomim eila afilu b'tzua ketana yesh reshut l'melamed l'hakotam b'shar yemot hashana, saying that the teacher is prohibited from using the shoelace this time of year falsely leads to the conclusion that the shoelace is permitted other times of the year. And it's already perfectly clear that the shoelace is permitted other times of the year, and therefore the statement of the Shulchan Aruch is a bit superfluous. If we look at the modern poskim, like the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, Lo yaku talmidim o abanim b'yamim ela, you cannot inflict corporal punishment on the talmidim or your own children this time of year, and he too has no limitation regarding the time of day. Okay, up to this point, I hope we've been convinced that in general, a certain level of corporal punishment is warmly embraced, warmly approved by the poskim. We've yet to see what modern poskim say. We'll come to that in a few moments. But the reason to avoid, the reason to prohibit corporal punishment this time of year is because of special mystical danger. Since it is mystical danger that is involved, the Eshel Avram, family name was Varman, of Aram Varman. He was the Buchacha Rav. He writes, Kol sfeikotem bichlal lo yeda shomeh psoim Hashem. If there is any suffix about whether or not corporal punishment is correct, in any situation where there's any doubt about whether or not it's correct to inflict corporal punishment, the rule is to be lenient, and it's okay. After all, the Torah teaches us, Shomer Psoim Hashem, you can always rely on God to defend you. You can always rely on God to protect you. Well, therefore, corporal punishment should be prohibited only in cases where it's clearly and definitively prohibited. Similarly, Haramat Ritzuah, Nira Gamken Shakapeda Dafka B'Haka B'Mokum Sakana. And since during this time of year, using the strap against the child is prohibited because of sakana, therefore, use of the strap against the child should be prohibited only if the child is struck on a part of the body which will endanger the child's life. If the part of the body that you strike is not a part of the body which is going to endanger the child's life, go for it, according to the Eshel Avram. Neged Devarim Panimiyim Mamash, only if you strike the body in a place where the internal organs might be damaged and the child might die. Makom Makom Bertzua Dafka Ki B'Yad Efshel Fales Nesivapo. And unlike the earlier poskim who we saw, who prohibit striking with the hand altogether, he says striking with the hand is better because you have better control over how hard you strike the child. With your hand, you have better control than using a strap. And this is the reason why nowadays no one cares about what it says in the Shulchan Aruch that you should avoid striking the children or the Talmidim this time of year. That's why nowadays the teachers are indeed inflicting corporal punishment on the children this time of year. This is why the parents do it this time of year, just like all the other times, because they're not striking the children on a part of the body which might endanger their lives. No one is concerned about these halachas anymore because there is no sakana if you aim the blow correctly on a part of the body which is not going to be dangerous. כיוון שאסור לנטור איבר לתינוק מחשש עיבוד לדס, but of course, one is not allowed to strike the child in a way that will make the child angry. Why are you not allowed to make the child angry? Because the child might go and commit suicide. Oh, we don't want to strike the child in a way that might lead the child to go out and commit suicide, as it says in Chazal. Where does it say this in Chazal? It says this in Chazal in Masechet Smachot. Masechet Smachot is one of the smaller Masechtot, not part of the regular Shas. This is a part of a series of smaller tractates which were put together by the Geonim in the post-Talmudic period, immediately after the close of the Talmud. And in this Geonic tractate, it says, Maisa is a story. Betinuk Echad, one child, Bnei Brak, from Bnei Brak, Shibet Sluchit, this child, a plate. Heralo Aviv Ba'azno, the father gave him a blow on the ear. It Yerememeni. The man of the child got frightened. Halach v'ibud atzmo mabor, and committed suicide, jumped into a pit. Ba'u v'shalu Rabbi Akiva, they asked Rabbi Akiva about this. Amar, Rabbi Akiva said, Ein monim hemenu davar. Even though someone who commits suicide is usually deprived of a place in a Jewish cemetery, has to be buried separately, because suicide is prohibited and therefore an evil act. This kid who committed suicide should get full honors, should not be treated as a suicide because he was forced into it by his parents who punished him. Therefore, the Chachamim say, Al yira adam letinok ba'azno. Therefore, if a child misbehaves, do not strike the child on the ear. Ella malkeu biyad. Instead, strike the child on the hand. O shotek lo maklum, or don't do anything, but not on the ear, because that might anger the child. Then the child might go out and commit suicide. I hope that you found all of this approximately as tiring as I have. Now, everything we've looked at is from the old world. At this point, I want to point out that the great Rabbanim of the new world, and here I have a passage from Rav Shlomo Carlebach. Rav Shlomo Carlebach was one of the great mashkichim of the previous generation, immensely influential in the world of Musar, immensely influential in the world of Chinuch. He writes as follows: Ein l'sha'er kama mazik adam liyeled ka'asher hu makeh oto makot shel mamash. It's impossible to estimate, it's impossible to know how severe the damage is that will result from striking a child. Striking a child results in incalculable injury, incalculable harm. It's really very bad. Rav Eliyahu Lopian, one of the great mashkichim from the previous generation, Haya Omer Lanu Tamid, always used to teach us, Im Yiladim Rak B'derech Tova. Children must always be treated well. Always. Hu Amar Shaleit Ziknato, the great Rav Lopian said when he was older, Shuhit Charet, he regretted Kol Makash Natan Yiladim Shelo Kishahayu Ktanim. When he got older, he regretted having spanked his children when they were young. He had 11 children. And many of those children became great Rosh Yeshivas. Still, he regretted having spanked them when they were children. Chazal Omrim, it says in the Gemara, in the Midrash, Kol Esev ve'esev yesh lo mazal, hamakeu omer. Every blade of grass has its own mazal. Every blade of grass has a malach, an angel, which strikes the blade of grass and says, Gadel, grow. Why does the grass grow? Each individual blade of grass has its malach, which strikes the blade of grass and commands it to grow. What אומרת, this means, שאותו כוח המצמיח נקרא בפי Chazal Maka. Well, when Chazal say that the angel gives a Maka, a blow, to the blade of grass, and this is what makes the blade of grass grow, we understand from this that the koach hatzmicha, the power to grow, the ability to grow, is called in Rabbinic Hebrew makah. The word makah, normally translated blow, hitting, in Rabbinic Hebrew is the word for the power of growth. Chazal mitkavnim lomar sheyesh koach matzmiach shel ha'esev, koach zeh nikra b'lashon Chazal maka. Maka is the power of growth and improvement. Although the word does mean, in most contexts, to hit someone or to hit something, in dealing with children, the word has a very different meaning. Makah does not mean a physical blow. It means nurturing the ability to grow and develop. This is why it says in Sefer Mishlei that if you fail to strike the child, you must hate the child if you fail to discipline the child by striking him. What the pasuk means is that if you fail to nurture the child's ability to grow and mature and develop, it must be because you hate the child. It has nothing to do. The pasuk has nothing to do with physical punishment. It's talking about nurturing a child to grow and mature. The verse has nothing to do with imposing physical punishment. There are better ways to nurture a child's growth, drachim tovot yoter, better methods than physical punishment. Well, Rav Shlomo Volba is, I chose as an example, typical example of modern thinking, and you see a complete change in the thinking of the rabbis in modern times regarding physical punishment. Now remember at the beginning of the class, I said you should keep in mind the idea that in the Gemara and Sanhedrin, simply raising one's hand, not even imposing a blow, is prohibited. Simply raising your hand against someone makes you a rasha. Next week, I want to study that Gemara and see the ramifications of that in greater detail. That'll be for next week. Until then, I wish you a good week and a safe week, and Shabbat Shalom, and look forward to seeing you all again next week.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you so
Anyone have
much.
any questions that need discussion now? Sipora, you have anything? Okay,
No, that was pretty good.
good.
Thank you.
Okay, very good.
Shkaya.
Are you the pianist? I see a piano behind you.
I'm not a pianist, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, it's
Yeah.
not too late. It's not too late. You can still learn.
That's true. And there's a piano right there. So,
Okay.
oh, can you learn how to play
Yes.
piano in 3 weeks? I'm joking. I know you can.
Yeah.
Or what do you think? Please tell me.
I hope so. I hope you can. Yes. Yes, you can.
Okay,
Let me just point out briefly the basic idea. although this is a time of year when we should avoid simcha, a child or a grown-up who's practicing a musical instrument is no different than a child or a grown-up practicing any other skill. It's hard work. It's frustrating and hard work until you finally get the skill mastered. Of course, you have a sense of accomplishment afterwards, but the sense of accomplishment is not simcha. There's no simcha in practicing to acquire a skill. That's true in general. Similarly true in music.
Hmm.
Okay.
Got it. Great.
Ba'atzlacha.
Thank
Ba'atzlacha.
you so
Thank
much. Have a
you.
great day.
Thank you so
Okay.
much. Thanks for being.
Shalom, shalom.